Hi, I'm James Vowles. I'm the Motorsport Strategy Director for the team, and I'm here to answer your questions about the United States Grand Prix. Bumps were talked about by many of the drivers across the race weekend because they featured more than ever this year. On the pit exit on the left-hand side, on the run-up to turn 1 and towards the back straight and on the back straight itself, there were some quite significant bumps. And these weren't the type of bumps where you can just adjust your ride height by 1 millimeter to deal with it. These really require the drivers to take different lines to adjust. The good news is that COTA are on the case, and in fact for next year they're resurfacing a huge amount of the circuit. Over 2 kilometers of it will have new tarmac down. And the reality is, since 2012, the first year we went there, there's been 1.5 meters of subsidence of the track. That's enormous. The great news is they're aware, they're dealing with it, and I'm confident next year when we go back, these won't be a problem at all. Qualifying 1 and qualifying 2, both Valtteri and Lewis were trading times and both towards the sharp end of the grid. But come qualifying 3, Lewis dropped back to 5th. So what happened? During the course of the lap, underneath his right hand, there was a little rotary, and that rotary adjusts the engine braking. Normally, it has a guard on it, and what happened is the guard had accidentally been knocked off, and as he went through the lap, and every time he turned the steering wheel, he accidentally changed the engine braking, and that caused him to lose performance towards the end of the lap. Now, the mechanic spotted it immediately the second the car had come back in, but obviously that first run was compromised as the result. Come the second run, you would have seen everyone went slower. The track, in fact, had slowed down slightly. Small wind change, small track temperature change, and Lewis wasn't now able to compete at the front, ultimately sealing his place as 5th on the grid. Going into the race, our data from Friday showed it was very, very close between a 1-stop race and a 2-stop race. On this graph, you can see this was what our expectation was. The 1-stop would win out against a 2-stop runner and have a few seconds favour end of race, but it was close. On the first stint of the race, the strategists were calculating what the tyre degradation was and noticed that it had transitioned more towards a 2-stop. And this graph here that you can see is a representation of that. This is now using the data that we had gathered during that first stint, and the 2-stop now features. In fact, more so, it overtakes the 1-stopper end of race. Valtteri had done a brilliant job on that first stint and pulled just a little bit of a gap relative to Verstappen, enough that we could wait 1 lap from when Verstappen stopped. We could see his tyres were dropping, and indeed they came in for their stop, and Valtteri covered on that 2-stop strategy the very next lap, us now knowing that that 2-stop was competitive. With Lewis, that 1-stop still allowed you to gain track position, but you had to try and hold on to it at the end of the race. And that's why we opted for the 1 with Lewis and the 2-stop with Valtteri. Once we committed to that 1-stop strategy with Lewis, we're not finished. We are continuously reviewing the tyre curves to try and understand what it's going to look like end of race. Will those hard tyres hold on, or should we be converting back to a 2-stop strategy? And it wouldn't have been a terrible 2-stop strategy. In fact, he would have had a very, very big tyre age difference to Verstappen, and enough that maybe he could overtake on track. And that's what the strategists are continuously doing behind the scenes. We're reviewing how the tyres are performing against model, whether or not we need to adjust our data to understand what to do, how fast Lewis has to be driving, and what he has to really do to accomplish that 1-stop strategy. We reviewed changing to a 2 several times. And if we had, we would have fitted the medium tyre. It would have been the best tyre, not for the starter stint, but for when he would have caught back up to the back of Verstappen to overtake him. We went through the maths and ultimately decided to stay on that 1-stop strategy. We knew it would be extremely tight for those tyres to make the end of the race, but he had track position, and it would allow him his best chance of holding on to that podium. The yellow flags at the end of the race definitely helped Lewis. It was into the major overtaking point on track, which is turn 12, but it isn't the only overtaking point. You can also be passed into turn 1, and Lewis was holding on for dear life and did his absolute best. No one can say truly whether or not we would have been overtaken if those yellows weren't there, but the reality behind it is it definitely helped us. Thank you very much for all of your questions, and we look forward to answering more after the Brazilian Grand Prix.